Welcome back, June 8th, 2021. In the 1970s and 1980s, when conservatives would sometimes complain about liberals being soft on communism, Jack Kemp would correct them and say they're not just soft on communism, they're soft on democracy. Well, today, when some conservatives here speak of the Biden administration caring more about others and other countries than they do Americans in America, it's not just that they're soft on foreign policy at this administration, they're actually also soft on America. I give you President Joe Biden's first message to Congress, what is otherwise known as the State of the Union. There, President Biden said, quote, "We will get at the root of the problem of why people are fleeing to our southern border from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. The violence, the corruption, the gangs, the political instability, hunger, hurricane, earthquakes." He said he had, quote, "absolute confidence that Vice President Kamala Harris will get the job done," close quote. As Charles Kessler points out, a thorough moral and political reconstruction of 3 foreign countries should be a good start. Solving for hurricanes and earthquakes might take a little bit longer, but if we can bend the moral universe to our will, why not the physical one also? We'll come back to that. Let's first, or next, go to Kamala Harris in Guatemala yesterday and today. Yesterday, she told the Guatemalans, quote, "Our message is don't come," close quote. Is that what is considered a grand strategy these days? Telling a contumacious people in another country to not do what you have spent months and years telling them to do and that they plan on doing anyway? The president of Guatemala didn't think so. He said yesterday, quote, "When Biden took office, the U.S. message changed to we're going to reunite families, we're going to reunite children." And the very next day, the Coyotes were here organizing groups of children to take them to the United States, close quote. The president concluded by stating that he and Harris are not on the same side of the coin on immigration. Yesterday, Kamala Harris called it a grand gesture, and a false one at that, a grand gesture to visit the American border. But evidently, there's nothing grand or odd or eyebrow-raising or disrupting by traveling to Guatemala. It's not as if Guatemala is a country otherwise at the top of our priority list, is it? When's the last time you heard about it or thought about it? After all, it hasn't been visited by a U.S. president in over 20 years, and it's only been visited 3 times ever by a U.S. president. But with border states struggling, law enforcement suffering, citizens suffering, trafficking taking place, and drugs being smuggled in all to America, Kamala Harris says it would be a grand gesture to care about that, or rather them. You know, the them, Americans. Best to turn our attention elsewhere, perhaps to Guatemala. That's what Kamala Harris said yesterday. Quote, "On the issue of Republicans, political attacks or criticisms or even concerns, the reason I am here in Guatemala as my first trip as Vice President of the United States is because this is one of our highest priorities," close quote. Guatemala, one of our highest priorities. A total of 3 presidents have ever been there. Not America, by the way. Not Americans, Guatemalans. Which gets us to this morning and the Vice President's interview with Lester Holt on NBC. Do we have that audio, Chris? Here's Kamala Harris and Lester Holt.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well, I mentioned it because I know Republicans have certainly come at you on this, but Democratic Congressman Cuellar has a border district, has said to you and the president, come. You need to see this.
Listen, I care about what's happening at the border. I'm in Guatemala because my focus is dealing with the root causes of migration. There may be some who think that that is not important, but it is my firm belief that if we care about what's happening at the border, we better care about the root causes and address them. And so that's what I'm doing.
Oh, thank you. Let me reiterate after the trademark cackle and nervous tell, by the way, which always translates to I don't know and haven't got a good answer. That's what that cackle means. She says, I care about what's happening at the border. I'm in Guatemala because my focus is dealing with the root causes of migration. There may be some who think that that's not important, but it is my firm belief that if we care about what's happening at the border, we better care about the root causes and address them. So that's what I'm doing, she said. Guatemala is the first concern, obviously, here, not the United States. I know, she said it's in order to help the United States down the line. She said the changes will not be immediate and we will be in this for the long haul, and I suspect that's the first truthful thing she said. When you go after root causes, it does take longer. When your house is on fire, it's great that we investigate the cause, but we generally try to put the priority on putting out the fire and saving our human lives first before we tackle faulty wiring issues and construction problems. In other words, as old Screw Tape put it, the game is to have them all running around with fire extinguishers whenever there's a flood and all crowding to that side of the boat which is already nearly gone under. Now, what will and should rightly take even longer when those root causes include, as I said, as the president said, violence, corruption, gangs, instability, hunger, hurricanes, and earthquakes. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden may be very powerful, but not so powerful that they can stop Guatemala's violence or corruption, I wouldn't think. Never mind hurricanes and earthquakes. If that's what we're waiting for, we'll never solve the problem. By the way, earthquakes, though they are a terrible thing, I've lived through many, especially in California. I've never heard of anyone being able to talk about how you can actually prevent them, or hurricanes. But if Americans were your concern, cackling and begging citizens of another country for help and ignoring your own country's problems would not really be the strategy you'd pick, would it? But helping Americans first would be akin to helping America first, and the transnational woke and progressive ethos of the day, especially in the left and the Democratic Party, is to blame America first, to denigrate America first. It used to be apologize to America. That's what we used to do. Do you recall Barack Obama's apology tour and how disgusted we all were with that? We don't even apologize anymore. That would show a reckoning and all, I guess. We just go straight to criticism, if not damnation, and nothing but. So when the Chinese government or the Russian government blames us for human rights abuses to nullify our concerns about their human rights records, when they blame us for our abuses, they are using nothing less than the speeches and talking points of all that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and so many other Democrats have been saying about America for at least 3 years. When you declare America systematically racist with a massive shadow of original sin where black Americans have never been treated as fully human, and you say that, and the Chinese government then says all that as well, is it wrong that China said it, or is what China said wrong? You've heard me warn about overuse of words like fascist and fascism and tyrant and tyranny and all other such reductio ad Hitlerums. Of the many problems with engaging this way, one is to detoxify the noxiousness of the original. If, for example, a generation of children are taught that Trump is like Hitler or worse than Hitler, one can only look around the world and America and think Hitler could not have been that bad. If fascism and tyranny are shouted from the streets of America as attributes and descriptors of President Trump and from the base of the U.S. Capitol, fascism and tyranny cannot be that bad. Ironically, of course, the only ones censored are President Trump and his supporters, but in any event, we've so overblamed America that China and Russia and Islamo-fascists don't have to invent propaganda against us. They can just transcribe into their languages the language of the Democrats from Ilhan Omar to Joe Biden. And guess what? Now, if we are as bad as China or Russia, if America does to its minorities what China does in Xinjiang province or elsewhere, all of which is the intended narrative, what Russia and China do can't be that bad either, right? Oh, there are poor Muslims in America and there are angry Muslims in America. I get it, just like in China. Oh, you say China has slavery. I get it, just like we used to have and still profit from, even as its legacy. But the problem is America just ain't that bad. In fact, if you took a Uyghur Muslim and plopped him in any city in America, he'd literally think he was not in another country or another hemisphere, but in an entirely different world. But what we have accomplished here is really just a new example of defining deviancy down, detoxifying it, as I say, by putting America on par with all the evil and all the worst evils of the world for political posturing at best and fundamental transformation at worst. But the distinctions in philosophy, as in politics, as in all life, really do matter. And if distinctions between, say, America and Germany in World War II, or America and the USSR were lost on you or others, it makes eminent sense to me that distinctions between America and Russia and America and China today are equally meaningless. It's also more helpful to import and implant socialism here if you can nullify and sanitize current socialist luridities. One way is not to ascribe the luridities, but rather to put our country on par with them. After all, again, if we're like them and things ain't that bad here, indeed to some of us we think this is a great country, then things can't be so bad over there either, right? And poof, you make the guilty innocent and the innocent guilty, defining deviancy down. That's the phrase from the early 1990s Daniel Patrick Moynihan essay where he wrote, quote, "By defining what is deviant, we are enabled to know what is not, and hence to live by shared standards." That is why a political science that dismisses values and distinctions between right and wrong and good and bad, the project of the relativists, that's why we define deviancy down to a more common thing that is accepted rather than a regretful and an anomalous part of social behavior that is discouraged. And as Martin Luther King put it, morality becomes shaded and colors of right and wrong lose their distinctiveness. So do countries. And that is not a good thing to get used to. Being soft on America is the crime here. Caring about her and her citizens and being strong about her and her citizens and prioritizing her and her citizens is never something to apologize for or dismiss as something less than secondary. It leads to chaos, the root of which means empty and void. I can't think of a better definition of relativism, and lack of distinctions than that.